everyone, I'm Janessa.
And I'm Brad.
We're from the blog almost7homesteading.com, and we are getting our first green bean harvest of the season in. We got our garden in a little late. We got moved into our property and it took quite a while to get the garden prepped and ready to go for the first year, but we are really excited to see what we have for our first green bean harvest here at our new property. So we're going to take you along with that, and then I'm going to show you some different ways to preserve your green beans. So stick around for that part of the video too. We love to pick our green beans when they're a little smaller. As you can see, they're probably about 4 or 5 inches here, but they're really skinny. We like to pick them before they get any of the big seeds in the middle of the beans. They're just a little tastier that way. They're tender, not nearly as tough, and they don't have strings in them like you'll sometimes get with the bigger beans. So that's how we like to pick ours. And we're just picking all of our beans here. Our first harvest was not that impressive, really. It was actually less than a full bucket, but any harvest is better than no harvest, of course, and it was a perfect amount to show you the first preservation method that we're going to be going over here in a couple minutes. If you grew your own green beans or if you purchased fresh from a farmer's market, you definitely want to go ahead and snap the ends off of your green beans before you prepare them for any preservation method. So that's what you see us doing here. My mom joined me for this one. She's a little camera shy, so you'll probably only see her hands, but we love doing all of these projects together, so you might see her in there a little bit. So here I'm just washing the green beans. You want to do this no matter how you're preserving. We are just filling the sink with some cool water and going back and forth a few times, swishing those around, and then just transferring them to a clean towel. So to start off the first preservation method, we're going to be freezing the green beans. So we need to get a big pot of boiling water going on the stove, and then we're just going to transfer those beans into that boiling water and blanch them for 3 minutes. This is so simple. All you have to do is that 3-minute blanching, transfer to a sink basin of cold ice water, and then swish them around in the ice water for just a minute or two, and then transfer them to another clean towel before you package them up in your freezer bag or whatever you plan to store them in, and put them in the freezer. And when you pull these out and pop them into the skillet to cook, they honestly taste like they are fresh from the garden picked that day. You will love this method. It's so easy, and you can get this done in 30 minutes or less. So be sure to give this one a try if you have some extra green beans. So as I'm sure you all can tell in this video, this is taking place over the span of a few days, and that's just because that's how the garden works. That first picking that we got of the green beans was not that impressive, less than a bucket, really just enough to show you the preservation method by freezing. But the great thing about green beans is that a lot of times when you get that first picking under your belt, your plants are going to start to flourish. And that's exactly what happened with ours. We got a great harvest in on that second picking just a few days later, probably 4 or 5 times what we got the first time. And so that is going to be plenty to show you all how to preserve this second method, which is by canning. Now the freezing method is really great. It's honestly my preferred method of preservation for the green beans because you can pop them in the skillet and in a year later, they taste like they're fresh from the garden. And so that is awesome. We love those green beans that way, but if you want a little bit of a longer shelf life, canned green beans is going to be the way to go. Canned green beans can stay on your shelf for up to 7 years. And so if maybe your next year or year after that is really not that great of a harvest, you know that you still have some green beans to enjoy and get on your table, even if your garden didn't produce that well. So let's jump into the second method of preservation, canning our green beans. So the canning method definitely takes a few more steps than the freezing method, but it's definitely still totally worth it. I'm going to start this process by thoroughly cleaning my mason jars and my rings. It's really important when you are canning to make sure everything is really clean and really even sterile. It's going to make your canning products safer, last longer, and it's really going to help make sure that you don't have any issues with obtaining a good seal. So start by washing your mason jars and your rings, even if they're brand new, and set those aside. Next, I'm going to go ahead and clean out my sink so that I can get my green beans washed, just like I did with the freezing method. You want your beans as well as all the equipment that you're using to be very clean for this method. So we're going to wash those beans and transfer them to a clean towel. Once again, this is exactly the same as the cleaning method for the freezing process, and I'm just swishing these beans around in some cool water in a clean sink 2 or 3 times and then rinsing them under cool water again. If you see any defects in your beans, maybe any spots where it looks like a little worm nibbled on it, or if there's any brown spots, go ahead and just pick those off and just discard them. Alright, now I'm just boiling some water in my tea kettle so that I can sterilize those mason jars, and I'm going to do that by filling them about halfway with really hot boiling water and then dumping it out right before I'm ready to pack the green beans. I'm also going to be getting a little saucepan of water going on the stove so that I can sterilize my lids. I'm just going to let that simmer, and then just before I'm ready to pop my lids on my jars, I'm going to place those down in there just to sterilize those as well. And as you can see here, I'm going ahead and filling those mason jars about halfway with that boiling water to get them nice and sterile. Alright, moving on to getting my canner ready, I went ahead and filled it with 3 quarts of water, which is what I need because I'm going to be doing a full canner load of quarts. Now, you'll always want to check your canner book to see exactly what their specific guidelines are. For this process, this particular canner holds 7 quarts, and so since I have a full canner load, I need to fill it with 3 quarts of water. But once again, always check your canner book for its particular guidelines. And now I'm just packing my green beans in my jars, pressing them down as tightly as I possibly can to squeeze as many in there as I can. And then I'm filling the jars halfway with boiling water, and then I'm just gonna press those down even more and pack a few more green beans in there to get as many as I can. Then I'm gonna go ahead and top these jars off with 1 teaspoon of salt. I like to use sea salt, of course, I find it the healthiest. And then I'm going to go ahead and just fill these jars all the way to the top with boiling water. Go ahead and add my lids, screw on the rings, and these will be ready to go into the canner. A really important step before you place those sterilized lids onto your jars is to wipe the rim with a clean, wet cloth, just in case there were any particles that would have gotten right there, maybe little pieces of salt or anything like that when you were packing, because you don't want any obstruction to obtaining a good seal. That is what is going to give these green beans a really long shelf life. So make sure to wipe those rims off and get everything nice and clean. And then you can place those sterilized lids onto the rims. Be really careful here, try not to touch the seal part, and be really careful when you're putting the ring on as well. Try to just touch the top and then just screw that ring on and you're good to go. Now you're going to want to carefully transfer those jars to your pressure canner and just make sure that they're setting in there nice and even. And once we get all of those jars in, we're going to go ahead and place the lid on the canner and clamp it down, and then we'll get the flame going under this so that we can start processing these jars. So I've had this canner going over about medium to high heat for, I would say, about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm starting to see it vent. That's what we call that when that steam is coming out of the top. And so since I'm starting to see that, I went ahead and timed 10 minutes, and then I placed the pressure gauge on after those 10 minutes. After the pressure gauge has been on the canner for, about 10 more minutes, I would say, you're going to start to see it jiggle, and you will hear it, of course, as well. And I forgot to mention the canner should be under 10 pounds of pressure. And at that point, you want to time 25 minutes to let those process after you have started to hear and see the pressure gauge jiggle. After those 25 minutes, just turn the flame off and let the pressure canner cool down completely before you take the lid off. You don't want to try to speed this up or anything. You want to just let it cool down naturally on its own, and then you can take the lid off of your pressure canner and remove your jars, and they should all have been effectively sealed. You want to, of course, check that, make sure that the lids have popped down and they are sealed. But other than that, you are good to go. These are ready to just enjoy all winter long, and you have some beautifully processed canned green beans at this point. Alright, well, I hope you all enjoyed these tutorials, and I hope you're enjoying gardening season as much as we are. As usual, thank you so much for stopping by, and I really hope to see you all here again next week for another video on wholesome, self-sufficient, and handcrafted living.